Okay, so looking into the derived spawners, critter spawners, I have the centipede and the insect, and the critter spawner, whenever a new wave occurs, it is alerted by the gameplay controller, which I'll look into later, and it just calls these two functions on those two derived spawners, which will update the member variables of those spawners, and I guess we can see those first. So right here it just resets those values that were given on initialization with the new values for the new wave, and then for the insect spawner, the same thing. It initializes those, and then on construction for the insect spawner, you can see it just uses the wave to set its own values in the initializer list. But for the spawners themselves, they interact. The insect spawners do the interaction with the factories for actually initializing and registering the game objects, and you can see that right here. Basically, it will alert the gameplay controller to reset its alarm for a particular insect spawn, and if it's able to spawn based on its parameters, it will spawn it with the appropriate parameters. And then the same thing for the centipede spawner, but the centipede spawner is also given to the centipedes and is able to act as a observer to the centipedes for callback, such as for when the wave ends, or when the centipede reaches the bottom, or a centipede is killed and a mushroom is supposed to be spawned in its place. But yeah, so basically on the wave start, you can see right here, it'll spawn the however many head count solo centipedes, and then also the wave main centipede, which is just done right here. And so, as I was saying before, the critter spawner is what interacts with the gameplay controller, and the gameplay controller, the critter spawner controls the actual spawning, whether or not it should occur, and it maintains a active list of critters which are registered on initialization. Each either insect or centipede in its initializer, in its base class initializer, will register it to the list when it appears on the scene, and then whenever a insect is to be destroyed, it deregisters it by passing its node. And you can see the class for my active list is a custom linked list, that and also a node class, which simply has a function to either link a critter to the list, unlink them, and then also to recall or kill all the insects, and that simply just calls mark for destroy on each active critter. And unlinking is simply managing the links of a linked list, and each critter in the base class critter has a node that is set on initialization, set and linked on initialization. But back to the gameplay controller. The gameplay controller is a singleton game object which controls the spawning for these critter spawners and centipedes and insects, and then also controls the respawning of the player and updating of the player's movement and firing. So looking for those key presses and updating accordingly when it's alerted of those key presses. And then it has the alarms for spawning. It actually is the object that houses that. And so in order to properly so first here's where the gameplay controller updates the user, and I'll look into that later. The user, based on its game status, it is just updated, and that's a strategy pattern. And then the send it for the insect spawning, it simply just is alerted when to start its alarms and cancel its alarms, basically. And since this is a singleton game object, it is externally managed, and the thing that houses the gameplay controller is whatever the game mode is. So that has a static recycling function which does nothing but will be is owned by the game mode and will be deleted when the game mode ends with the scene.